Okay. Now, I don't know too many other sort of HR, people, culture type conferences where in the space of 60 seconds we go talk about HR law for firing people into holocratic budgets. This is awesome. I don't think I've ever heard the word holocracy and holocrat said that often in such a short period of time. And we need like a self-help group or something that we can bring together. This is it. So I'm going to talk about culture by design, and specifically I want to talk about the idea of a culture-first company. So why does it matter if you're a culture-first company? If you are a culture-first company, what do you look like? And then, part of the question of the day, how do you measure that? How do you bring data to bear to this thing? So I'm going to start, you probably can't read the text, I'll read it out to you. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. Does anybody know what that's from? Little Prince, thank you. One of the things to keep in mind, one of the things I learned in Hollywood, and I didn't realize until I moved into the world of culture and people how important it is that for all the data, for all the methodology, for all of that, at the end of the day, it's actually poetry. It's stories. It's taking people on an emotional journey. And so that's what I want to talk about today. So who am I? Didier. I usually just stop at the first name because they struggle with that, and the second name, I'm lost. So I'm the CEO and founder of CultureAmp. I'm also, I like to refer to it as social profit rather than not-for-profit. We still try and create something, it's just that we measure that not in dollars, we measure that in outcome. So I'm the social profit, I'm on the board of the Atlassian Foundation and the Alfred Research Foundation as well. Look, my 16:9 doesn't work. In an earlier life, I ran Rising Sun Pictures, so Hollywood visual effects company. And I worked with several theatre companies, and I was on the board of Tourism Australia. And all of these have informed my journey and what I've learned along the way and what I try to bring to what I do. Given that we're running a little bit late, I would normally actually do an exercise here. How many people were at the Culture by Design Summit that we ran earlier in the year? Only a couple. So you got to see this in action. I won't run it now, but I'll tell it to you, because even if you don't remember anything else I say, this is really valuable. It's not mine, I'm stealing it shamelessly. So we had a person, Leanne Renninger, who works from a company called Life Labs. Unbelievably good coach, unbelievably good facilitator. And she uses this thing called a word storm. She says she does it every day. And the idea, it goes like this. So just pretend that we've done it. I'll explain it to you and then I'll explain why. So the idea is, in a room like this, you give everybody a piece of paper and a pen. You say, pair up. You've got 2 minutes. I want you to write as many questions as you can about the pen. Go. So everybody does, and they go for a little while and start asking questions. What does it taste like? Where was it made? Etc. And then you let them go, and you say, how many did you get? 10, 15, 20. A good group will get about 20. And you ask people, reflect on it. What was it like? And what tends to happen is the first 5 or 6 questions come real easy, real fast. Okay, cool. Yep, know what it is. And then there's a pause because you've used up all the easy answers. And now you actually have to start thinking a little bit. You start having to enter into what Leanne calls a curious mind. And it's actually a very different mind space. And the thing that makes this experiment work is that it's a biohack. Like you just do it. It doesn't matter what the questions are about. 20 questions about this lectern. And it forces your mind into a thinking process. And why do we do it? We do it because the curious mind is open to possibility. And so it's the mind you want when you're about to try and do something difficult. We've talked a bit about firing. If I'm going to walk into a room and have a difficult conversation with someone, do I want a closed mind or an open mind? A curious mind enables me to go in there and actually create some emotional rapport. So pretend we've done the thing. You've all done it. You're now in a curious mind. So why build a culture-first company? There are a lot of reasons why people say culture matters. I'm a big believer that the way we motivate people at work has changed. Not because the people have changed, but because the work has. So, something that I like to say, slightly provocative, but I believe it. Gen Y does not exist. Millennials do not exist. It's a cohort effect. Somebody who was 22 years old 30 years ago feels exactly the same way as a 22-year-old today. And this matters, and this is actually really important, because by putting these labels on it, we're actually doing ourselves a disservice. Back in 1938, I think it was, Henry Ford said, "Why is it every time I ask for a pair of hands, They come with a brain attached. And the prevailing model of management thinking is still stuck in 1938. It's still, how do we motivate the hands? And everyone in this room, everybody that works for us, is being asked to do increasingly high level of cognitive work. It's high cognitive load work. It's not hand work, it's brain work. And that requires a different methodology. So how many people have read Dan Pink's Drive? At least half the room. So he writes a great book on this idea, and he really goes through it and he talks about what it means. And for me, that's one of the most important ideas in that book is that it's not about Gen Y, it's not about millennial, it's anybody who's being asked to do this type of work. You have to think about how you motivate them differently. So going back to Hollywood, this was from Brad Bird in a McKinsey article, and he said, does everyone know who Brad Bird was? He's a director, famous director, did The Iron Giant, and he also did The Incredibles. And he said, if you have low morale, for every $1 you spend, you get about 25 cents of value. If you have high morale, for every dollar you spend, you get about $3 of value. Companies should pay much more attention to morale. And I love that, because it cuts right to the heart of why all this stuff matters. But the problem is, when we talk about culture, this is often what people think. I don't know who can see these people down the bottom here. This is a picture, and I hope that no one's in the room. This is a picture from a consulting company that helps with HR and culture. And look, they've got all the different gender diversity issues, and they've got their hands together, and they're about to say, yay! Hold your hand up if you have one of these values, core values. Integrity, who's got integrity? Yeah. Who's got customer service? Yeah. Accountability? Yeah, good. Teamwork? And innovation. Welcome, well done. You're just like everybody else in the world. And this is part of the problem. When people think about culture, they think about things that they think don't really matter. Culture is not soft and fluffy. It's built for a purpose. Both of those are cats. One of them will rip your throat out. So, what do all these companies have in common? Many of the people who have got up today have talked are our customers, and we're very proud of the fact that we get to work with all these incredible people. So we've surveyed over 1 million people now. We have launched over 2,500 surveys and over 300 companies. And when you pour through all of this and you talk to these people that are committed to trying to be culture first, trying to change what they are, trying to become something better, you start to see some patterns. So what does a culture first company look like? I think there are three things. There are three things that a culture first company does. The first one is that they see a world that others don't. What does that mean? We talk a lot about vision, we talk about mission, we talk about the journey, where we're going, and all of these things, and people get up and say, we're going to be this, we're going to be that. The best ones are able to articulate a world that doesn't exist yet. And the moment they say that, the hairs on your arm step up and you just go, that creates an energy. There's a desire to do something now. So my favorite vision of all is, and now I'm in SF, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. Their vision is humans should be an interplanetary species. Anyone want to tell me who that is? SpaceX? Whoa, what a vision. Like that instantly crystallizes a vision of a world that does not yet exist, that most people think can't exist, but they have the courage to do it. And there's a whole range of ways you can go about thinking this, but it's often really valuable just to start with the line, we believe that. What is it that you believe that other people don't? What is it that you believe needs to come to pass? The second thing is that it builds on a promise. Now, one of my the thing that just kills me is when we talk about brand and marketing and we stand over here and we get this group of people, we've got our circle in a holacracy sense, and we're talking about brand and marketing and we have a great conversation about what promise we're making to our customers. And then we go over here and we start talking about culture and values and we don't have any of the same people and we're not even looking at each other when we have this conversation. It's madness. Brand is a promise to a customer. Culture is how you deliver that promise. And this is what great companies understand. The two have to be done together and they have to be connected together in the way that you use them. There was an amazing campaign done in Australia by a large bank. And brilliant campaign. They really redefined what banks were meant to be in a way. And I was talking to one of the chief HR people there, and I said, so what are you going to do to change the culture? Because the culture you have can't deliver that promise you just made. And I looked at their values, and their values didn't line up. And she said, our CEO doesn't believe that the values we have need to line up with the brand values. It lasted 6 weeks. And then the last thing is, you have to know what you're going to hurt for. So when we talk about values, values are not what you want to be on a good day. Values are not aspirational. Values are what you're willing to hurt for. Now, well, this says here, it's a corruption of the Shakespeare, bleed with me and you'll forever be my brother. For me, that's the heart of what great culture is about. It's understanding. Now, hopefully this is not physical pain and blood, but you're in a place you don't get enough sleep. You could earn more money somewhere else. You don't get to spend enough time with your family. Why? What do you care enough about? What do you share as something that is important that you're willing to hurt for it? So, a culture-first company sees a world that others don't, builds on a promise, and knows what it will hurt for. So, what does one look like? So, this is us. So I'm going to talk through us in a little bit. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. Are we intentional? And I've heard that word a lot of times today. Yes, we are. So our mission is we believe the world should be a better place to work. That thing for us came out of an understanding of if we're going to spend all this time working on something, I'm involved in foundations, I'm involved in charities that do amazing work. We spend so much time at work, and Hung, you mentioned it so well at the start of the day. If we can make just a small difference to that, that's a massive positive difference to the world. And the promise that we want to make our customers is to learn how to build a better culture. So everything we do is based around the idea of learning. Now, when it comes to values, I'll talk through these. We have 4 values: create better people geeks, have the courage to be vulnerable, trust people to make decisions, and learn faster through feedback. So the first value for us is about, Kathy Sierra wrote a great blog post where she said, don't just try and create a better tool, strive to create a better user. And so I'm wearing the People Geeks t-shirt. For us, a people geek is somebody that mixes those 2 things together, and we measure ourselves on how that person improves, not just how good our technology is. The endpoint is not the software, it's what the person does with it. And so that runs through everything we do in the company. Have the courage to be vulnerable is an important value to us, and it goes back to our promise. When we work with clients, the number one thing that stops them from being able to improve their culture is that they're not willing to be vulnerable with the people that they work with. They're not willing to get up and talk about what really matters to them. You know, I worked with a company, there was an amazing company, that one of the reasons they were amazing is they were thrifty as hell. And I did some work with the leadership team and talked about values, and they talked about all this stuff, and I said, well, why isn't thrifty on there? You guys are insane. Like, you save the paper clips. And they're like, oh, well, that's not sexy, it's not inspiring, it's not motivating. It's like, well, for some people it is. You know, that's actually something you can hurt for. That's something that people can buy into, but you're just turning it away because you think it's not important. So it's about being vulnerable and opening yourself up. Trust people to make decisions, I learned in building a company. One of the things, we all want to engage everybody. At the end of the day, we're growing so fast, we can't wait. We can't bring everybody on that journey, on that decision. And so you have to say, not what is the right decision, but who is the person to make that decision, and then let them do it. And it actually goes into the next one, which is learn faster through feedback. Why do we trust people to make decisions? Because we don't expect anybody to get it right the first time. And actually the important thing is who's willing to take accountability for what comes after and then learn and repeat and improve. So it's actually more important for somebody to say, I'll make a decision, and it might not be the right one, and I'll learn from that and move on. So if you're going to turn these values into something real, the words on the page, as several people have said before, don't mean anything. You actually have to tell stories. So I'll tell you a small story, which we shared yesterday at our catch-up here. So trust people to make decisions is a very important value to me. And about a month ago, there was a conversation going on in the office back in Australia, which is where I'm based, and they were talking about which monitor we should have. Now, one of the things I did in my life in visual effects was I spent over 10 years writing software to color correct monitors. So I know more than I care to admit about the colorimetry of monitors. So I wandered over and started getting engaged in the conversation. And we had a very good, interesting conversation for 15 minutes, and then I walked away. And it wasn't until I was doing an onboard induction with one of our new staff members and I was going through the values that I realized I'd made a terrible, terrible mistake. What I should have done is walk over, hear this person talk about the monitors and say, this is a really interesting point. We don't have a head of IT. We don't know who the right person is here. So how do we make a decision? Who's the right person? And then once we make that, I should say, okay, I can tell you if you want to know, and then I walk away. So I betrayed my own values in that situation. Now, I tell that story because that means everybody else in the company knows the CEO stuffed up. He had to be accountable to it. Everybody should. Where that actually manifests itself, which I think is something that works out quite nicely, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we've just done a rebrand, and part of our new logo is based around the Japanese concept of the Enso. And our designer wrote this. She wrote, "The Culture Amp platform captures moments in time in a person's journey, both professionally and personally. Over time, these snapshots tell a story. The process of asking and answering questions becomes a ritual or practice from which emerge opportunities for change and growth." And when I read that, I almost cried, because that is the best description of what we want to do with our technology. And she came up on that on her own. I didn't tell her to write it or anything. That was just her interpretation of what we were trying to do. And so when something like that happens, it makes you feel like, okay, we're doing something right here. And I touched on it before. The other big part of us and what we are is being people geeks. So it's the hard and the soft combined. This is why we wear the t-shirts. And it's why all of you are here. At the end of the day, I don't care if you're a customer of ours or not. What I care is if you're a people geek. And can I come and talk to you? So, okay. How do we measure this? I reckon this is the most overused quote in the whole of the Valley. "In God we trust, all else bring data." Edward Deming. It's actually quite simple. You learn, you act, you repeat. That's it. That's how you measure. That's how you improve. Now, there's actually some subtlety to that. To do it well, you have to ask the right questions. You have to build on the answers and create a case for change, because the hard thing is actually not asking the questions. The hard thing is doing something with the answers. And then you have to fix something, and then you have to go and do it again. Now, people talk about whether surveys should be real-time, continuous, whether they should be once a year, whether they should be once a month pulse surveys. All of these things make sense. I mean, Jim mentioned earlier that a lot of people are just running their culture off once a year survey. And it's like trying to run your company off a balance sheet with no P&L and no cash flow. So once a year, you get to look at your balance sheet. Did we do well or not? I don't know. I can't remember. Equally, if you just try and run your business off a cash flow, you'll do great. Like, you can do a lot worse than running a business off a cash flow. But there are things you'll miss. There are things you won't see, big things happening underneath that are actually deteriorating, and you're not even aware that's happening. So it's about thinking about what you're trying to do and mixing what's required. And in terms of the questions themselves, one of the things I like to say to people, we have 3 PhDs in psych on staff, but survey design is not just a psychologist in an ivory tower telling you what makes people happy. It's an intentional description of the experience you want your people to have and measuring if it's happening. If you're using a survey, that's bidirectional. Every question you ask is telling people what you think is important. So you should really think about the questions you use and why you use them. And when asking the hard questions, be prepared for the responses. If you're not ready, don't ask. The worst thing you can do is go get all this information and do nothing. Amazing how many people take this approach to the data they get back from their customer survey. Sure glad the hole's not at my end of the boat. And once you've got some information and you want to do something, the best thing you can do is start with a question, which is, what happens if we do nothing? So we call this the null hypothesis slide. So if you're going to present the results back to an exec team, you say, hey, we've learned all this stuff. Go through the data, and the first question you have to answer is, what happens if we do nothing at all? You extrapolate the data and you explain to people, if we do nothing, then half the women that we've employed are all going to leave. That production management team we just spent all this money on trying to win, they're all gone. There's a trend that's happening. You can choose to do nothing, but you have to choose explicitly. Once you've made that case, you've said, okay, look, we need to change something. Change one thing. I cannot stress that enough. You get the data back, it's like a kid in a candy land. All these things need to change right now. We really, really need to change all of them. Don't, you won't. You won't be able to do it. Culture change is really hard. Anything to do with people and culture is hard. So the best you can do is look at it, talk about it, have a good description, and say, okay, well, what can we actually make a difference on? And then go change that. Because nothing happens until you do it again. It's the repeat bit that everybody forgets. And the thing about this is that it's not about measurement alone. One of the things we like to say to people is that your cycle of action is actually much more important than your cycle of measurement. I'd love to have real-time data all of the time. It's absolutely fantastic. I can tell you if I do nothing, the data will dry up. So you need to think about at what speed can you as a company act? And then you need to think about how you collect data so that the people who are giving you that data are actually seeing a result of what happens. So, in summary, the world is changing. The world of work is changing. So should you. You need to be a culture-first company. If you want to do that, you need to understand your DNA. You need to think very carefully and very intentionally about what you want the experience of your people to be. And then you learn, act, repeat. So ask the right questions, build the case for change, fix one thing, and do it again. So I'm going to finish with a quote, which is my anthem to entrepreneurship and why I fly over here from Australia. People who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those that are doing it. Thank you. I mean, I can take questions if people want, or otherwise I think I'm standing between the bar, aren't I? No? No, no one wants to ask a question. Seriously though, does anybody want to ask a question? You know you're going to make me the one person that didn't get a question. You are, aren't you? No, there's one here. Sorry, I couldn't see.
Mike's coming over.
I'm part of an organization that is a Culture Amp customer.
Thank
you. One of the things that I'm very curious about is the direction that people analytics is going to go in the next 5 or 10 years, because while I love Culture Amp, I don't see it as a business model that's going to really last in the sort of static way of measuring people. And where do you think that's going to go?
Thank you. That's a fascinating question. When you go talk to people and you say, hey, we do culture analytics, or we help people with stuff, their eyes light up. And they see a God dashboard that's just sucking in everyone's social exhaust and instantly telling them who's going to leave. And that's pretty cool and compelling. Every time somebody says, can we have a super dashboard for the whole company where we'll pull all your data in and we'll put it into our Oracle system because they sold us predictive analytics and everything's going to be predicted. That's been bankrupting CIOs for a very long time. So we actually see right now, our thing is to help people walk, and then to run, and then to fly. There is actually some really interesting stuff you can do with the data. You start cross-correlating across what's your exit data telling you with your engagement data, and how does all of this come together, and you can start doing some of the predictive analytics. And in terms of how we capture the data, so going away from once a quarter, once a year, once a month, once a week, whatever it is, in some ways it feels a little bit hokey that we have to use that. And at the end of the day, we don't care where the data comes from. So Jason, who's our chief scientist, has a saying which is, user experience is an overlooked element of statistical validity. What that means is you've got to make it nicer and easier for people to give you their data. So to answer your question more specifically, I think in the next 5 years you're going to see massive shifts both in how we capture the data, but then also what we do with it. But it's actually the what we do with it which is the one that needs the most work. So surveys at the moment, they're okay. They're a lot better than they were 10 years ago. The reporting now, all of us, Glint, us, everybody, we're like 1 out of 100 of what's possible. There's so much that can be done there to present that and make that better. And that's the journey we want to go on. So thank you for the question. Am I wrapping now so you can bring it in on time? Okay. Happy to take more questions once we get out there.